Yep, we're ready.
Okay, so we're going to talk about horseshoe crab monitoring in the Maryland coastal bays. And let's see. Okay, so horseshoe crabs, they spawn in the springtime and the new and the full moon once the water temperature gets up to about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And they spawn on the high tides at the new and the full moon. And the reason they do that is because they're higher up on the beach when they spawn, and so they'll lay their eggs, and the water will go back down again for 2 weeks, and that's the warmest part of the beach. So they're cold-blooded, so it incubates the eggs, and so then when they get a new high tide in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, the eggs will hatch and they'll be on their way. If anybody has any questions, you can jump in at any time. So we do a spawning survey. Delaware Bay has a big one, and we also do a spawning survey where we go out and we count the crabs, and we see when they're spawning and where they're spawning. So we're looking for how many are spawning each year and where they're spawning at. And this is an island that's just north of the Ocean City Inlet called Skimmer Island, and we get quite a few crabs up there. We got up to 18,000 in one night. So the horseshoe crabs spawn in groups, and in this picture here, you'll see there's a female in the middle and there's a female over on the right, and then they have many attendant males that follow them around. And there's anywhere from 1 to 8 females that are associated with each female. The female will dig in and the males will surround her or attach to her. The eggs are really important for migrating shorebirds, and this is a picture of some sanderlings that are actually feeding on the eggs, and this is a picture of a short-billed dowitcher, and I don't know that much about birds, but I think that's a long bill. I'm kind of surprised that that's a short-billed dowitcher. I hate to see a long one. So this is these birds are feeding on the horseshoe crab eggs as they get turned over on the beach. And this one bird is called the red knot, and it's pretty much a signature species in that it migrates all the way from Tierra del Fuego on the south end of South America, all the way up to the Hudson to spawn. It's a 18,000-mile journey. I think it's 18,000, might be 6,000. Anyways, it's a long way. And they stop in Delaware Bay to feed on these horseshoe crab eggs, and they'll increase their weight considerably. They eat eggs for like 2 weeks. They show up starting in early May, and they have to be gone by June 7th, or they can't pull off their nesting successfully. So this is called the Rufo red knot. It's one subspecies of red knot, and it's just an amazing journey that they do. And the horseshoe crabs are critical to them because they need the weight gain to, first of all, they've had that long flight, they've lost a lot of weight, and then they need the weight gain to reproduce successfully, nest. And these are actually the horseshoe crab eggs that they feed on. And it's really cool because they're really dark green. The dark green ones are the ones that were recently laid, and the lighter colored ones are, some of them are hatched, and some of them are in the process of hatching. They actually molt while they're inside the horseshoe crab egg a couple times before they even hatch. So a really good way to see what I'm talking about is for me to play this video I found on public television. So let's see if I can get this to play. Uh-oh. Let me try this again. Let's see. Doesn't seem to like the full screen. I'll do this one more time. I'll keep it on small.
Steve, we can't hear that. Are we supposed to be hearing something or just watching it?
Yeah, let's see.
It's cool either way. There was also a question on how do you tell the females from the males in that picture where you had all of them clumped together?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
The males are the smaller ones and the females are larger. This video is going to show that. I'm kind of concerned that this isn't playing. You, can you hear it?
No, we can't hear it. But let's just watch it. It looks pretty cool as we just watch it. They have the captions.
Okay.
If there's anything you want, you could talk over it because they look very cute. Those are some of the chin eyes. So Steve, if they're on their back, they can't flip back over?
Okay, I'm sorry that that didn't work so well.
Wow, that was great, Steve. That's a wonderful video.
Yeah, it's a really good one. You can find it if you just Google horseshoe crab spawning on YouTube, it'll come up. So let me go forward then. Did you get it sound at the very end?
I did not get, no one got, I didn't get sound. I don't know if anyone else got sound.
Okay, well, good. If you're interested in it, go ahead and Google horseshoe crab spawning video. It has pretty much anything that I talked about. Okay, so horseshoe crabs are also used for biomedical, and they bleed them and then they put them back in the water again. And the reason that this blood is so good for biomedical is horseshoe crab lives in a very hostile environment. If you've ever heard of anybody that gets cut in salt water, they can get all kinds of infections like MRSA and a lot of other Vibrio. There's all kinds of really hostile bacteria that are in the saltwater environment. So they have a really highly developed immune system. So if horseshoe crab blood, which is blue because it uses copper instead of red for their hemoglobin, it'll precipitate around the bacteria and it'll envelope it. So this reaction has been used to test anything that goes intravenously in the humans or other animals. Anything that goes in your body, like a needle or a vaccine or a knee or anything that goes into it, it has to be tested by this LAL, Limulus amoebicate lysate test. And so we have a fishery where they actually go out and collect the crabs, they bleed them, and then they'll put them back again. And we've worked with the biomedical companies to have really highly developed handling procedures. So our mortality, Maryland has the lowest mortality of any state in the country, and or any place in the world actually. We've documented mortality of like 1.5% of the crabs that actually don't make it. So I mean, 98.5% are actually successfully bled and returned to the water again. And also we have a bait harvest for horseshoe crabs that they're used for bait for whelk or conchs and also eels. And so the amount of horseshoe crabs that are harvested are regulated by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Council. And they have developed a model working together called the Adaptive Resource Model that takes into consideration how many eggs are required for the migrating shorebirds to make their migration successfully, and then still being able to harvest some of the horseshoe crabs and leave the horseshoe crab population sustainable so that it is prospering, not declining. The model has been in place since 2013 or 14, and it's been very successful with the horseshoe crabs. The feedback we're getting from the model is that the horseshoe crab population is doing very well, but unfortunately, the red knot population has not been responding to this. So they're wondering whether there might be also some factors like coastal development that are affecting the shorebirds, that bringing the horseshoe crabs back hasn't been enough to make the shorebirds recover, which is kind of sad. I mean, we'd like to see the shorebirds come back. So we just had a meeting today where they approved a new model to harvest horseshoe crabs, and the Atlantic States Marine Fishery Council was conservative in that the model was recommending that we could harvest female horseshoe crabs at this point, but the board recommended that, or made passed the harvest recommendation that we're not going to take females yet, even though the model says that we can take females. They wanted to hold back on the females until we saw some response from the red knots. So even if the red knots, even if the horseshoe crabs are all over the place, we're going to hold off for now until we see some response from the red knots. So in Maryland, we have a spawning survey that we do mid-May through mid-July. Our spawning season's a little later than in Delaware Bay. Like I said before, in Delaware Bay, they have to be done spawning, and the birds have to have eaten and gone by the middle of June or June 6th to reproduce successfully. But our spawning doesn't even really get going until mid-July. So we have six sites that we do, and this map is of Ocean City and down towards the south end where all those circles are. That's the Route 50 bridge. And so most of the spawning that we see is right there, right around the Ocean City inlet. And then there's some beaches further up the bay. We pretty much concentrate our activity or searching for these crabs around the inlet, and we're thinking they probably maybe start spawning further up the bay earlier because it would be warmer there, but we just haven't been able to identify those beaches yet. So we sample these beaches yearly to assess the population to see, if it's how it's reacting year to year, if the spawning is the same or less. So this is some of the data from our spawning survey. And if you look over in the left-hand side, go up to about 2009, you'll see that the catch per unit effort, which is the number of crabs we count divided by the number of surveys we do, from about 2009 until 2022 is pretty much around the same range. If you do some statistics on this, it's pretty much statistically the same. And the reason that it jumped up before 2009 is because in the first couple of years of doing the survey, we were just sampling random beaches. We didn't really know where the concentrations were. So I wouldn't really use this data to say that there was a big jump in there. It was just actually a artifact of not being able to find the greatest concentrations. But once we were able to zoom in on the areas of the highest concentration, it's been staying between like 300,000 to 500,000 crabs per survey. And then if you go over on the right-hand side here, you got May, June, July, and August. You can see that the bulk of our spawn is in June, like I was saying previously. That that 68-degree temperature seems to be hit in June, and that's when we get our most spawning. And then this is also from our survey, and what the survey tells us is that, they'll start 18C is about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. They start spawning right there around 18C on the left-hand side, and you'll see like 20 is their peak. And then this is 7 of the beaches that we've sampled over here on the right, and the date that the spawning peaked at those beaches, and then also the temperature that we found. So that they start spawning around 18C, and then they seem to peak right around that 21 degree on average. And
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
Steve, Lonnie has her hand up. Question?
Okay. I can't see
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I meant to write in the chat, but I didn't want to interrupt you, but I had a quick question. If we had more living shorelines all around the bay, do you think that we'd end up with horseshoe crabs coming in to lay their eggs there?
Absolutely. I think living shorelines are a wonderful idea. I mean, one of the biggest problems we have is horseshoe crab strandings on riprap, and we've actually got some volunteer groups together that when we identify areas where they're getting stranded, they'll go over and take those crabs off the beach. We also work with some people at North Beach down on the Chesapeake and some other areas where that they've done the same thing. But living shorelines are wonderful. A lot of the living shorelines, they'll put like biologs, and then they'll have openings with little sand indentations and stuff, and those are absolutely perfect for horseshoe crab spawning. Did you have some more questions?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then so that HTTPS address I have up at the top is we have a web page that it's an app actually that's on the Maryland DNR web page. If you Google Maryland DNR horseshoe crab survey, you'll get this this survey where if you find a place that horseshoe crabs are spawning, you can actually input the information, and then we're, making a map. This is more actually applied towards the Chesapeake, although we do input areas from the coastal bays, but it's helping us identify areas that they're spawning at. I mean, now we know that they're spawning like above the Bay Bridge and, all the way down from there, but this actually is creating a record of where they're spawning at, which is good. Like, in the future, if there's development and such things like that, we can actually, know that that's a spawning area. And then also the spawning survey that I do with the Maryland coastal bays, and I've got their address on there, and Carly Tulan, she is also who I work with. And then my email address is on there too. If you have some more questions about horseshoe crabs or their survey or anything about horseshoe crabs, I can probably point you in the right direction. And that's what I've got.
Well, Steve, can you now that you're sharing, can we unshare? Because I think that we do have some more questions for you, but we can do that as a big group.
Okay, let me unshare.
We have more living shorelines in the bay.
Yeah. Okay. Are you back?
All right. Yep. So we have one. Okay. Are the beaches closed while they spawn? Is one question.
They are not. Like Skimmer Island, the area that we get that largest concentration, it's actually closed for shorebird spawning. Although the last couple of years it's deteriorated to the point where we only get a couple of pairs of oyster catchers on there. It used to be a really big spawning area for let's see, what are they called? Black skimmers and terns used to spawn there. So that beach is closed, but a lot of them are open.
And go ahead, and if you want to ask Steve a question, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you, or you can put it in the chat box. My question was, in that video that you showed us, it said it took how long did it take for the juveniles to mature and come back as adults?
Okay, so males take between 7 and 10 years to mature, and females average about 10 years to mature, and then they have a active spawning life of another 10 years. The average lifespan is 20 years for a horseshoe crab, so it takes 7 years for a male to mature and 10 years for a female.
And what is the out of the 4,000 eggs that are spawned, how many survive to maturity levels? Do we have a percentage on that? Probably
like 1 to 2%. I mean, the horseshoe crabs are like, that's why they make such a good bait, because those horseshoe crab eggs, everything eats them. The eels love them and shorebirds love them. Everybody loves them. So, I mean, they lay like 4,000 eggs per time they spawn, but I've seen numbers upward of 20,000 that a female will lay within a year.
Lauren has a question in the chat. Do you know why they have the 10 eyes? Does each eye have a specific task?
So they're not like eyes like we would call eyes. A lot of them are like light sensors. And so they're so dependent upon the moon and light that a lot of them are light sensors. And why they have so many, I'm not so sure, but they're not all the same either. They're different types of eyes. That they have like 3 different types of eyes on there that see different things.
And Heidi has her hand up. Go ahead, Heidi. Heidi, you want to have a question? Heidi? So could you tell us a little
Are the fossil Are the fossil horseshoe crabs about the same size as modern ones?
So I don't know the answer to that question. I know that the number that gets thrown around a lot is 400 million years, but and they look a lot like chitons, but I don't know if they were the same size or not. I'm sorry. It's a good question.
Thank you, Heidi. Could you tell us a little bit more about the whelk fisheries connection and what
Yeah,
what
so
is the whelk?
a whelk is we have channeled and smooth whelks, and the channeled whelks are lighter than no, we have channeled whelks are smooth whelks, and then we have knobby whelks as well. So the channeled whelks are the ones that pop because their shell is actually thinner, and they go up. They have like a box without a top on it, and it has a string around the inside. And the whelk will go over the top and into the box, and then they can't get out again. The string will block it. And so the whelks are used for an Italian dish called spumoni or something like that. They grind them up and they use them in like a red sauce. It's supposed to be really delicious. And then they're also popular in the Asian market. And a whelk weighs about a pound, and they'll go for $5 each. They're pretty expensive, and they fish for them. Like Ocean City has 5 potters that run about 1,000 pots each, and it's a pretty successful fishery. I mean, a whelk pretty much is a snail, and it's about 5 inches, 6 inches long at maturity. They take a long time to mature. They take like 7 to 10 years to mature. So it used to be a really boom and bust fishery, but we put a 6-inch minimum size. My predecessor at my job did some research on maturity, and he put a 6-inch minimum size, so most of them are mature. So the fishery's been a lot more stable since we've done that, it's been about 15 years now.
Lonnie asks, is there an alternative bait source than horseshoe crabs, or horseshoe crabs are the best?
So for whelks, they can also use dog shark or skates, but it seems like that and they'll use them in combination with horseshoe crabs sometimes, but it definitely seems like the horseshoe crabs are the best. And for eels, the female horseshoe crabs are the best, but because of the situation with the red knots, we've determined that we would give up some of that benefit just to protect the females so that they can produce eggs for the migrating shorebirds. It's really sad with the migrating shorebirds because, I mean, there's like 100 different types, general average of 100 types of migrating shorebirds, and I think probably 90% of them are threatened at this point. So coastal development is just taking their toll on the shorebirds.
Steve, we have a couple of questions that have to do with what happens. Where do the horseshoe crabs go when they're not spawning? How far do they range from the spawning grounds, and where do the juveniles go once they get back in the water?
So the juveniles are like a black hole. I mean, they catch a bunch of juveniles in Delaware Bay, but for some reason, I've not ever caught a juvenile horseshoe crab. And I mean, I've caught some like 3- and 4-year-old ones in the coastal bays, but I haven't caught the really small ones. So they say that the small ones stay in Delaware Bay, but as far as where they go, I mean, we catch them up to like 30 miles offshore in the wintertime. They go pretty much deep in the winter to overwinter so that they don't get into really cold temperatures. It stays a couple degrees warmer if you go offshore a ways. So they pretty much migrate out. Some stay in the bay, but a large majority of them migrate out in the fall.
So they don't migrate. They stay in sort of close. They don't go far afield. Has there been any tracking, like you put any trackers on them or anything to see where they go?
So there's a Fish and Wildlife Service does a lot of tagging of them on these on the spawning beaches, And one time I found a pair of horseshoe crabs that were tagged, and I sent it in to Fish and Wildlife Service to find out, where these horseshoe crabs were tagged at. We've caught a lot of tag crabs, but it was really cool because these two crabs, I found them together, and they had been tagged together 7 years previously in Tom's Cove in Virginia. So when you think of a school of fish and stuff, you don't really think about it like, is that the same fish? Are they hanging out together that they've always hung out together? And some of the stuff that the horseshoe crab's telling me makes me think that those fish and horseshoe crabs, while they're schooled up, they actually stay together for their whole lifetime, which I think is really cool.
Very cool. Lauren said that there are 4 types of horseshoe crabs, and the 3 others are off the coast of Asia. So how come do you know how they got over here into the Atlantic?
So I think that horseshoe crabs are like a generalist wherever they find the climate and food and resources that they need, that they'll colonize that area. So I think they probably were all over different places at different times. But the one thing that I do know about the Asian varieties is they've been over harvested, and our population is the only really strongly viable population at this point because of the protections that we put in on them. So, and the other thing is that we've had these regulations in place long enough now that the market for the horseshoe crabs is stable, and they're not asking, the watermen aren't asking for any more crabs. They're happy with the level of harvest that we have right now, and it seems like it's a sustainable level of harvest, which is good. But the other varieties of horseshoe crabs that are in Asia are slightly smaller than ours, and they've been over harvested pretty much. They've been overutilized, so they're not as in a happy place as ours are.
And they're being harvested for biomedical or for bait?
They eat them too, bait and human consumption.
Oh.
Like if you Google them on YouTube, you can see people cooking them up.
Well, I got to put some Old Bay on that and see how that tastes, I guess.
I don't know. I'm not gonna do it. They're not a crab. They're a they're from the spider family, so they're basically a big spider.
Right. All right. Do we have any other questions? So we can feel confident that our in Maryland, our horseshoe crabs are thriving and doing very well. Is that correct?
It appears so. Yeah, I would say they're either stable or increasing at this point.
Heidi has her hand up again. Go ahead, Heidi.
I'm sorry if you answered this question already and I missed it. What do horseshoe crabs eat?
They eat whatever they can get in their mouth, but they like you'll catch them a lot of times when you're fishing. They like fish bait, squid, worms. They really like worms, and they eat they're omnivores. They'll also eat like algae and macroalgae and SAB. I mean, they're an omnivore, and they have a wide range. They'll pretty much eat anything, fish, whatever they can get on.
I guess that's why they're not very picky. That's helped them stay alive and thriving for all these millions of years.
Yeah, they're a really cool species to work with. We have a program that we did for a number of years called Green Eggs and Sand through the DNR Education Department, whereas we collected a bunch of eggs and hatched them out and gave them to a bunch of school children to raise in the classroom, and then we have an event at the end of the year where they release them at Sandy Point Park. And so it just, a lot of inner city youth we work with that program. And so we're just like trying to get kids interested in what's going on below the water. And a horseshoe crab is a really good species to work with for that.
Fair
the po-
asks, yeah, go ahead.
I can see, are the populations on the Chesapeake and coastal bays and Delaware Bay distinct, or is there one big pool of DNA? So we've done some DNA analysis, and I can't directly adjust the Chesapeake Bay, but they think that like the crabs that we harvest off of Ocean City are about 50% Delaware Bay origin crabs and 50% not Delaware Bay origin crabs. So like the further away you get, the less commonality they have. I mean, they definitely have some intermixing between the whole Atlantic population, but the further away you get, it seems like they separate a little bit. So they're not completely distinct, but they're not completely the same either. They're, depending on the distance as how common their DNA is.
We have a question. How long will it be before the ASMFC revisits opening the female horseshoe crab fishery to harvest?
So the model that they approved today actually would allow, I think it'll come up every year whether they want to, I'm not sure, but it looks like every year they'll address that issue. But hopefully, I mean, as long as I'm around, which might not be too much longer, but I mean, for the next 5 or 10 years, I mean, I would like to see some response out of the red knots before we open up the female harvest. I really think that's a prudent thing to do. Also considering that the bait market is in a, the fishermen have decided that, we can wait. And so if the fishermen can wait, we can all wait and see. I don't care how long it takes. I'd like to see some response from those red knots. So, I mean, it might not ever happen. It might be coastal development that's affecting them. It might be, predators or something, but we'd like to see some response out of the red knots before we start harvesting females.
So how easy is it if you were to pick up a couple of eggs off the beach? Is it legal, like you do with the green eggs and sand program, if we wanted to take them back and kind of watch that happen?
Yeah, there's nothing to stop you from doing that. And you only need like maybe 10 eggs or something. You can scoop them up, and all you got to do is put them in a pickle jar with a bubbler, and they'll hatch.
Well, that sounds like something we should have going on at the at Natural History Society in the museum, going on and watching that. That would be fun.
Yeah, if you're gonna do it in a public way, just let me know and we'll get you a scientific collection permit. So, there's no question about, if it's okay or not.
And when is the best time? You said it's in July and it's the full moon. If people wanted to go out and see the spawning.
The best time is in June on the full or the new moon. Mid to late June, full or new moon. Mid-June is the best on the full or new moon. And if you want to go see them, the best place to go is Ocean City. Go down across the 50 bridge and take a right towards the inlet. And there's the Inlet Motel, and then there's also Sunset Beach right there. And those are the two easiest places to get to see the horseshoe crab spawning. And then you can go, and it's really cool because the full moon at that time of year is right at sunset. So you can go watch your crabs, and then you can walk over and go over to the boardwalk and have you some French fries and watch the moon come up. It makes for a nice evening.
Has anybody on here seen the spawning? Put it in the chat box. Has anybody done that? Maybe we should organize a trip and head on over down the ocean horn and watch us some spawning. Would that be fun? All right. Any other questions for the horseshoe crab counter of Maryland? Megan's been, Robin's been. Good, good. Shireen's been. She volunteered in surveys. Do you need volunteers for surveys?
So, I mean, we're pretty good staffed in Ocean City, but if you want to do, like, if you have a local beach and you want to input your data into that that database that I talked about earlier, that would be very helpful. If locating new areas, that would be very helpful. Or if you want to do the stranding rescue in the Ocean City area, you can contact Carly at the Coastal Bays office. So that that address I presented earlier.
What is the stranding rescue? I don't know if I recall that.
So in like at Chesapeake Beach and North Beach and also some areas in Ocean City, the areas that have been riprap, you know, where they put the large rocks and stuff, a lot of the crabs get hung up on there. And so we've identified some areas and volunteers come like early the next morning and take them off the rocks and release them so that the birds don't pick them out, don't pick their guts out. And they don't bake in the sun.
And that's an organized effort through Coastal Bays, or?
Yeah, they've been coordinating it. You know, they're letting people know where the crabs are and when they get there and when they need to be there.
Okay, that's great. Any other questions for Steve? Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming this evening. Let's see. Oh, Fair asked, is Sandy Point a good place to see them?
I am not sure. I mean, I know they do spawn up that far, but I mean, you can try it full moon in June and see. I think it probably, I don't see why it wouldn't be. I know that at the Chesapeake Research Center over on the other side they spawn. So I would think it probably would be a good place. It'd be my guess, but I can't confirm it.
All right, we need to go answer that question there. But thank you, Steve, for coming out and sharing with us this tonight. And thank you for all you've done since 1993, helping
Thank you.
Understand and manage our fisheries and keeping them #1 and healthy and prospering. So thank you very much, Steve, for all that you've done and all that you continue to do to help our fisheries. We appreciate
Well,
it.
thank you for your interest. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you all, and thank you everybody. We hope to see you very soon. Remember, next week is current research on the importance of overwintering of insects in leaf litter and why we need to leave the leaves for fall. So come back and learn more with us. Stay well, stay curious, and stay outside, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.